Welcome to the Voice of the Agent debate, and this is chapter 3. Today we're going to be talking about agents' views on economics, politics, the housing world and regulation. And I am genuinely delighted that I'm being joined by Verona Frankish.
Thank you for having me.
The CEO of Yopa, chair of Women in Estate Agency, and so much more. We've changed the format this time because in reality, with the panel conversation we've had before, I've not really been able to get into depth with an individual who really understands this sector. So what we're doing this time is going to extend a conversation with 3 brilliant people from the industry. Verona's leading the charge, so therefore you're sort of the guinea pig.
Right.
I promise to be gentle and not do a Paxman. But as I say, the Voice of the Agent is essentially a longitudinal study of what agents genuinely think. We have lots of people who are very noisy in the industry, shall I say. What the Voice of the Agent does is ask people who are actually out there in the field doing the job and get their wisdom. Then it allows people who lead the industry to discuss what they say. So I'm going to start off with the first question which we had was about economics. What we're finding is, despite the fact that most agents see the industry doing okay and they're quite positive about it, they're quite concerned about the economy overall. So only 1/5 of agents are saying they actually think the economy will improve in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
Is that affecting business planning at Yopa, or what signs are you looking that means you might need to change course?
So I guess, first of all, of course, the economic mood music impacts consumer confidence. And when consumer confidence drifts or drops, generally transaction volumes follow. And I think you're right. The market has been incredibly resilient over the last few years. And it's fair to say we've had a few headwinds, not many tailwinds. And as a consequence of that, I think all businesses have to be aware of what's going on. Now, from my perspective at Yopa, we're aware of what's going on in the market and the wider economy, but we're not paralyzed by it. We don't allow it to dictate our pace, and we certainly don't allow it to dictate our strategy. But we definitely look beyond the headlines, and as you would imagine, I'm very, very keen on data and insights and understanding what's the behavior of consumers. So we obviously look at the data, and we look at market listings, we look at transaction volumes, the stock on the market, how the balance between it being a buyer's market or a seller's market, which has shifted over the last 12 months. So we're always looking at the data, but we're very much focused on the things that are within our control. And that is about, delivering fantastic customer outcomes, pricing to make sure that marketing strategy is right for the consumer, and also keeping a very forensic view on our costs, so that if things aren't going according to plan, then we can be agile and we can react quickly. So I think overall we're very mindful of what's happening, and I think you would be foolish not to be aware of what's going on. But most business leaders are going to be creating their own path and sticking to their own journey.
So go on then, how is business for Yopa?
So we've seen significant growth over the last 3 years, and that's been a really clear strategy from our perspective. If I take this financial year into consideration, we've grown revenues over 50% over the last 3 years. On the point of costs, we've had to look very forensically and in detail at our cost base. We've reduced our cost base significantly, and we've moved the business in a really positive direction. And even this year, at the minute, this month, we're trading 13-14% up on June last year, which was a good month last year. So I'm very fortunate to say that business is good.
And with a market that isn't growing fantastically like it was, say, during the period we had with COVID, which was extraordinary, where do you think you're taking market share from?
Great question. So it's pretty well documented that the hybrid market has shifted significantly, and we're taking more of that market today. Purple Bricks has their market share has declined. We're seeing that month on month. We have grown our headcount by about 43-44% in the last couple of years, and that has meant that we've more boots on the ground. We've granulated our franchises, and we're getting better productivity per head. So all of those things means that we're growing. So we're definitely taking it from some of the hybrids, but we're also taking it from some of the local independents. And depending on where we're operating in the country, we have some incredibly successful franchises in this area, as an example, that are growing year on year on year. And we're just seeing where we are delivering exceptional outcomes for customers, which largely is about selling their price within a time frame that works for them. Selling their property within a time frame that works for them at a price that they feel is fair in the market, and that's where we're winning. We are selling at the minute on average 80% and above of the stock that we're listing, which is pretty phenomenal.
So do you think the housing market, to a certain extent, is insulated against the broader economy? So we know the argument about supply and demand in housing. We'll talk about housing in the next question, but do you think actually the housing market's good and therefore you can take your fair market share, or is the housing market struggling, you're taking unfair market share?
So year on year market listings are up year on year. I think the last time I looked, I think about 8 or 9%.
Yeah.
So market listings overall are positive. So the market is growing. We know this obsession in the UK with owning our own property, and that will continue, as you mentioned or touched on. Supply overall is not where it needs to be. We still have a challenge with first-time buyers and affordability particularly, and the average age of first-time buyers is increasing, but also the average price of a first-time buyer property is increasing, and therefore the deposit required is also increasing, and that's definitely providing a challenge. But overall, the numbers speak for itself. Our market has been reasonably resilient despite the market or the economic backdrops. But I think there is definitely consumer confidence and the uncertainty around some of the bigger challenges that we have, whether that's war, volatility, and the economic affordability for households today is just becoming more and more and more challenged.
We see that in the report. It's a view that is held both by agents and by members of the public, is actually it's getting harder to join the housing ladder. It
Absolutely.
just is, and that's a systemic issue.
Unless you have parents, family members who can support or trust funds, it genuinely is challenging.
Which segues beautifully. It's almost like you know what I'm going to ask you next, which is perfect for the next question, which is agents are describing the housing policy in the UK across multiple governments as fantasy and parlour games. What do you believe needs to happen realistically for the government to win back trust on housing and actually do something?
So realistically is the really key word there, because the reality of our political system means that until there is a cross-party collaboration where parties think about the long-term benefits to the country, then we are going to still keep seeing this cycle of theatre. And this is the problem. So it's all big theatrical statements in order to get voted in, and then disappointment time after time after time. And by the way, regardless of political party, we've seen it time after time. You know, we only have to look at the number of, I've lost count actually, the number of housing ministers we've had in the last 3 or 4 governments. And, you know, we laugh about it, but it's actually, for such an important pillar of our economy, it's actually really frightening.
It's a disaster.
It is a complete disaster. And if we in business were running the country in the way that our politicians are, we would be out of a job. And, you know, no one is held to account. The theatre, the disappointments and the false promises have just become part of our daily lives. And it is quite frightening. So in answer to your question, what can be done? The first thing that they should be doing much more of is engaging with the people who actually do the job on a daily basis. There is a number of groups that I'm involved in, the home buying and selling group, there's Project 28. There's a number of groups that I'm involved in that are trying really hard to improve the sector, the economy, the wider economy. Charlie Lambden often says, fix housing, fix the economy. And it's a simple statement, but it's so true. And, you know, we are here. We want it to be improved for everybody's benefit, because if you do unlock the housing market, if people can move quicker, they can move without fear of, or they can at least make an offer and enter into an agreement without fear that that's going to drop off 5 minutes later, that there's more that you're tied to a contract earlier on in the process, that there's more information available to consumers earlier on in the process, then you unlock so many benefits within the transaction process. And if we did that, we unlock then all the other ripple effects around the economy, moving services, furniture, retail, sentiment. There's so many upsides. And if they engage with us to understand how we recommend to do that, rather than take a view at government and then push it down, often ill-informed, then what do they expect? So engage with us in a meaningful way and listen to our viewpoint would be my realistic recommendation.
So you're the CEO of Yopa. You're an industry leader as chair of Women in State Agency and other things as well, as you say. Are you optimistic this is going to happen? And sorry to put a downer on things if it's kind of...
So in the short term, I see small pieces of movement. So the Home Buying and Selling Group, brilliantly led by Kate Faulkner, Maria Harris plays a brilliant role in that, the open data. There is engagement with the political parties, and actually even before Labour got in, so across party engagement. Is it high enough on their agenda to make it a priority in the short term? Absolutely not. So therefore, that's my reluctance. So I think there's more engagement than there's ever been before, but it's still not enough. And is it moving quick enough? Absolutely not. I'm naturally a positive person. So I like to believe that people want the best for the country and for the economy, and that therefore in time we will make the progress required. But I think it's going to need a different approach than what we have today.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I mean, it sort of lends itself again to the next topic in terms of, and it was really interesting. You were very kindly stepped into this conversation. It's funny how many people were unwilling to stray into the next area, which is politics. Now, the way I would position this is current affairs, not politics.
Sure.
And we don't have to talk about any party allegiances or anything like that. But what was really interesting in the data is this is an industry that leans right. That's coming across in the data. It's probably what we would expect. And we would have seen in the last 3 years, when we asked people who they would vote for, but then this report asked, who did you vote for in the general election last year? The Conservatives always come out top. What's interesting between the general election of 2024 and where we polled them this year is the massive shift to reform, a total collapse for Labour. And the interesting thing about that is, do you think a state agency traditionally lent Conservative with a group of Labour supporters, they're just giving up on all the parties?
I think that's exactly what it is. I think the vote is actually for change now, as opposed to there is a complete lack of any clarity in terms of what each party stands for anymore. And that's the problem. Everybody's they're leaning towards the middle, they're leaning towards big theatrical statements. And we need less performative politics in this country. We need people to stand for something that they believe in and to work with the subject matter experts, whether that's estate agents, but also to form cross-party workshops, projects, in order for us to really understand what is the long-term need of this country, because we're just working from 4-year cycle to 4-year cycle. And unless we really take it's the same in business, right? As a CEO, I joined the business 3 years ago. I could come into this business and think, right, I need quick wins in order to get the headlines and to make an impact. But I've played, and a lot of business leaders do the same, they play the long game because they know that that is for the greater health of the business. It's for the greater culture. It brings people on the journey, and people understand what you're trying to achieve in the longer term because you've brought them into the conversation. And unfortunately, politicians are just losing that understanding of, as a country, as a nation, we are a company that has people that need to be engaged and on the bus with us in order to buy into that long-term strategy. And they're not seeing that at all. Or if they're seeing it, they're completely ignoring it.
Someone described it to me the other day as reform is essentially none of the above.
Yeah,
that's how people are seeing it. And it's such a huge surge.
Yeah.
And we actually have mapped the movement of people who voted last year to how they would vote this year. We have Greens, we have Lib Dems, we have Conservatives all going into the reform camp.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest growths we also see, Labour is too, I don't know. I don't know where I'll vote anymore. They've lost faith in the Labour Party.
And I know people who have been, really strong about their right to vote in the future, or in the past, who've decided not to vote this time because they felt like it made zero difference. Now, clearly I've had that conversation. If you think like that, if everybody thinks like that, then we're definitely in trouble. And you have to stand for something, but it's really difficult to put your name to something that you're not really clear of what they stand for, but even when they say it, whether they mean it and
Yes.
whether they're going to do something practical in order to implement said policies. And we only have to look at Labour's first 100 days to see what kind of a joke that is.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking to Russell Quirk later, and him and I have had some debates about this over the last few years.
He'll
in fact.
definitely do a better job on the politics front
No, you're doing.
sure.
You're doing. I'll reserve judgment on who. I think you're doing an extremely good job, and we know where Russell stands on politics.
We do.
He talks about what he'd like to do is have a national house building corporation.
Absolutely agree with him, by the way.
Apolitical and would have the targets.
Yeah.
My concern about that is there's an element of it that sort of rides roughshod over local people in terms of getting stuff done. The French are very good at this, in fact, because they just build whatever they want. One of the things I've suggested as a counter to that, and it's not one that finds much favour, probably because it's not something we're used to in the country, is have genuine citizens' assemblies. Get people to get together in local areas who are developers, estate agents, conservation officers, environmentalists, investors, whatever, but local people, but say, you need to build this number of houses.
Yeah.
You need to decide how to build it, but you need to build it. And I feel like I love the National House Building Corporation, but we know with government quangos, it can become a bit undemocratic.
Absolutely.
And I think the one thing we do want to hold on to a little bit, we talked about voting, is the democratic element in this.
For sure. And, democracy is something we should be and rightly proud of in this country. And, I feel incredibly fortunate to live in an environment and in a world where I do have a say and I can use my voice. And therefore, there are so many people at grassroots level in all of the areas that you've talked about and in business who could genuinely contribute to a better future for this country if only government would engage and listen.
It's interesting because I think the Labour Party had said they were going to introduce citizens' assemblies, but that seems to have been forgotten.
Funnily enough.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so moving on to kind of the next section, which is about industry regulation. 3/4 of agents now support mandatory qualifications. We've seen this consistently in 3 years. Even when we look at the people who aren't qualified, bizarrely, they support qualification.
Yeah.
Would you see mandatory qualification as a positive step towards professional credibility, or the biggest concern that gets raised to us is we're already burdened with so much legislation and so many restrictions?
Yeah.
What's the balance here?
So I think the first thing to say is we do definitely suffer from a credibility challenge in our industry. And I think one of the reasons for that is that the barrier to entry is low and it's not considered as a professional career in a lot of consumers' eyes because of that, because there isn't a mandated qualification. We talk about credibility in politicians. Our industry suffers from a similar shackle. And I think that qualifications definitely should play a part in that. I don't think it's the silver bullet that everybody thinks it might be. I definitely think it should play its part. A slight element of concern is that we could find ourselves that small independent businesses, to your point, there's already a huge amount of regulation, a huge amount of legislation and cost associated with running small independent businesses. And by the way, some small independent businesses around this country are the best in their area by a country mile.
You see the data to prove that.
And, I'm a huge fan of independent business. And I wouldn't want that they would be crippled then by trying to do everything that they're trying to do brilliantly for the customers, and as well as having the burden then of legislation. And also, we've some fantastic estate agents in terms of individuals in this industry that could be penalized because maybe they're not academic, they've got 20 years or 30 years experience and doing a brilliant job for the customers, but haven't got just not able to pass exams or got the time to qualify, or whatever that might be. So I do worry that it's actually going to create a bigger gap and a sort of an elitism in the sector that I don't think will be healthy. Having said all of that, I'm absolutely in favor of raising the standard and raising the bar and improving what we do for our consumers. But I'm also, in partnership with that, in favor of increasing the fees that we charge as a consequence. Because, as you know, I run a business, and, our costs are increasing year after year after year. And whenever the government makes, going back to the political ones, when they make changes about national insurance and national living wage, I'm all in favor of people earning a fair wage for what they do. But I'm also in favor of businesses having a fair crack at adding to the economy in a positive way. And the amount of increases in costs and charges, and let's not even start on portals. It is crippling for smaller businesses in particular. So I worry about that side of it.
You talk about fees there. It's interesting. I did I think it was 2024, it was actually 2023's edition. We looked at fees by the degree of regulation and qualification.
Right.
It's hugely correlated. The stricter the regulation, the stricter the qualifications, the higher the fees.
Yeah.
So we asked a question of over 1,000 homeowners in this survey. Would you pay more for better qualification and regulation? The resounding answer is a big fat no. They are very happy with light regulation and low fees.
Yeah, of course they are.
So we have a systemic problem in this country about fees.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And we have a lot to learn from our counterparts around the world on fees. And I think there's a massive gap between the two. And I'm not saying that we should go to the extremes. However, I don't feel as a profession that we are paid in line with the effort and the outcomes that we deliver for our customers.
I mean, a lot of our peer nations, they have agents on both sides.
Yeah, buyer and seller.
And that's the way it works, and that makes everyone gets paid on both sides. We do have, there's a few buying agents out there, very successful buying agents out there. Is that something we should encourage? There should be a negotiation on both sides?
And I think with the growth of the self-employed brokerage type space in this country, I think we'll see more of that. I've started to see glimpses of that in certain areas where there's more open houses, where they're doing brokers open, and introducing buyers and collaboration across networks, which is fantastic. All of those things will help the consumer get the best outcome from their perspective, but it also, to your point, ensure that there's a more fair and equal spread of a better fee.
Brilliant. I can't have the chair of Women in Estate Agency without asking a question about women in our industry. We're doing it again this year. So this is last year's report, the 2024 report. We found an extraordinary amount of women who had suffered some sort of gender-based discrimination. 71% had experienced gender-based discrimination from clients. It was about the same from colleagues. But if you add all the discrimination, it was like 83% of women had experienced discrimination from clients or colleagues, which was way more than men. We shared it with the trade press, and I even got a pushback. Is this real? This is extraordinary. We showed them the data and the sampling evidence to show that it was the case. As a leader in this industry, how can we create an environment where women feel empowered to challenge what is clearly an endemic behaviour?
Oh, that's a big question. And as you can imagine, I have a fair number of views on it. So the first thing to say is that your point about you get challenged, is this actually true? Therein lies the deepest problem in this industry. Before we can find solutions to that particular problem, we have to first name it. We have to acknowledge that there is a problem. The number of conversations I have had with individuals, mostly men, some women, where they say, oh, 60% of my team are female, 50% of my team are female. There is no problem. And in their little part of the world, they may feel like there isn't a problem because their own perspective is one that is inclusive and is one that values what women bring to the table. But I'm afraid to tell you, your data states it. We know, in fact, it is a much bigger problem than most people are willing to admit. So the first thing is we have to acknowledge it. Then we have to open up and create a safe environment, a psychologically safe environment, where women can say, this is a problem. I have experienced this situation and it did not feel good. Leaders have a responsibility to ask their people, how does it feel to work here? And be willing to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because for the most part, leaders want to hear the good stuff. They want to hear where we're doing well. What they don't want to hear is things that maybe doesn't feel like discrimination to them, but actually feels like discrimination to me or the next woman. And unless we genuinely want to deal with that challenge, then we need to stop asking the questions. If you're asking the questions, you want to know the truth. And as leaders, our responsibility is to listen with open ears without excusing, without saying, oh, yeah, but we used to have, now it's so much better. And unfortunately, there's too many examples where we are just shushing people down, whether that's through NDA agreements, compromise agreements on your way. I hear about them all the time. And as an industry, it is a bit of an epidemic. And unfortunately, whilst we are making progress, it's still a challenge. Now, do I think we've made progress? Absolutely, we have. In the 3 or 4 years I've been involved in Women in State Agency, I think we've made significant progress. You know, men who attend our conference tell me all the time that they thought they were modern. They thought that they had a really positive and inclusive approach. And they sit in our conferences and they listen to some of the things and the experiences that women have gone through. And they really then hold a mirror up to themselves and think, oh, maybe I'm not as enlightened as I thought I might have been. And that's brilliant. But unfortunately, that's such a small proportion of our industry that can attend conference, right?
I definitely want to get into that because, you know, I go to Women in State Agency Conference. It is the best conference I go to each year. Genuinely, it is fantastic. I often go through an entire pack of tissues, which, you know, is a challenge. Is there a risk there that we're already preaching to the converted and we are already allies?
Yeah.
There's an element, I think, from
those who attend are allies, right?
Virtue signaling going on from some anyway, because I need to be seen there.
Yeah.
How that's going on. Don't care. They'll hear the stories anyway.
Yeah.
There's a large swathe of men who go, it's women in a state agency. I don't need to be involved in that.
Yeah. And actually what's great is the first year that we did it, we invited men and we'd maybe 10% men. The next year we'd about 25%. And this year we had just over 30% of men, which is great. But you're right, those people who are attending typically are allies. We have to get the message amplified in different ways. So we're taking slightly different approaches. So we've recently, and this is not about plugging, by the way, what we're doing at Women in State Agency, because it's all free anyway. So I'm not plugging a business.
And it's really important.
And it's really important. So we have a Women in a State Agency pod, the WEA pod, which we launched about 6 weeks ago. And this is about shining a spotlight on individuals in the industry and their stories. And we've started to, and it's about vulnerable stories and opening up some of the challenges. Now, that in itself is difficult for some people to open up because they have then fear of what will people think of me, what will my boss think, what will my colleagues think. So we're really trying to encourage more people to share their stories so we can shine a spotlight on some of the challenges. The second thing we have launched is the Women in Estate Agency Supporter Charter. So this is an opportunity for every estate agent in the sector and every supplier to sign up to the charter to say, in basic terms, I am going to commit to these 5 or 6 things, which is not beyond the wit of, you know, sensibility, to say fair and equal pay structures for men and women, fair and equal reward and opportunities for promotion for men and women, to treat women with kindness and to give them a safe space to share their challenges. And we hope that it, as a very base level, if we could get more and more people signing up to that as a base level and understanding some of the challenges, create an environment then where they can talk to their people about, okay, we're signing up to this. This is what we're committing to as a base level. How do we then build on that internally? And that will look different from every single business in the sector. So we want to try and support and help. This is not us just criticizing and saying, look, we have more work to do. This is us saying we have work to do, but we want to help you to get there. And unless we acknowledge there is a problem in the first instance, then we can't address the solutions.
I often talk about Aviva Wittenberg-Cox, who's a great speaker
Yes.
on this subject, and she's came to a company that I work with, and it was a real shock to people when she presented data about what was actually going on. Because there's
Gender jaws is one of
Gender
hers.
jaws
Yeah.
is a brilliant one, and it's so obvious when you see it. It's like, why haven't we done that before? But it's the power of the in group.
Yeah.
You know, I was at an event the other day, and we were just talking about, actually, it was a family kind of just talking about families and young families with challenges, and I was just talking about the fact we're talking about the police. And they started talking about the police, and I said, yeah, it's funny because I always find the police really helpful. And then someone said to me,
yeah,
man,
male, white,
white,
privilege.
cisgender, you might want to just... And the problem I have with some of the language, because actually I am very aware of my privilege.
Yeah.
But if the moment you say privilege,
Yeah, it gets
there's a
people's
whole bunch of people
heads
go
up.
like, wokeism. And it's like, no. It's recognizing that in our society, now I had a gang of friends in my hometown. I said, this doesn't really sound really bad on video when I say this, but I was chatting to them all. I said, look, you know, white, male, middle class, well-educated, affluent, why aren't we all done better? And I got shocked about it. But it's like, it was an acknowledgement that we have all these privileges.
Yeah.
But I think so many people aren't aware, or are really, you say it gets their hackles up.
It does.
The idea that they've had an advantage when it's clear we've got an advantage, because look at our society.
Yeah.
How do we get to those people? Or are they just the rejectors who we'll get to at the very end of the journey in 10 years' time? Or sadly, they move off this mortal coil?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. And I battled with that myself, if I'm honest, because I've had some of those difficult, challenging conversations with people that I know very well. And and sometimes I have to pick my battles, because, you know, when you're going down a path and you realize this person is just not getting it, then I have to accept that for now I need to leave that where it is. You're right. It's a bit like in business, right? I'm not going to pick the bottom 10% of the people in terms of production that's going to make the difference to my result. I'm going to hope that they will see what's happening around them and they will learn some tips and techniques and improve. I'm going to pick the chunk in the middle that aren't yet where I need them to be, and I'm going to work on them to get them to improve. And then by osmosis and by listening and learning and watching, hopefully some of those will come up the ranks as well. It's exactly the same approach.
Yeah.
So let's focus on those who are sort of maybe snooping around and trying to understand what it is this women in estate agency thing is all about. But I'm not really, considering myself an ally just yet. And if we work on those individuals, and we're hoping that through the pod and the charter and the leadership training events that we do, that we attract more of those. And you can change everybody's viewpoint overnight. That's not going to happen.
So let's make this really practical. Let's say you're just starting out of this industry, and I'm not going to take all your time with an estate agency. We're talking about, but let's say you're a young person starting out in the industry, male or female. If they see bad behaviour, I mean, genuinely bad behaviour. I mean, this is not okay. What do they do? If a young man or a young woman, they see bad behaviour, specifically gender-related bad behaviour, then they've got no power. What action should they take?
We get this question quite a lot in the Women in Estate Agency group, which is a female-only group. And I
know Simon Wales has been trying to join for a very long time.
Yeah, and as much pink as he can throw at it, it's not going to happen. I actually comment on these all the time. And what's amazing about the group, by the way, and if you're not a member of the group and you are a woman, it's so easy and it's so beneficial. So I encourage you to do so. So what's amazing is when someone says, I have this challenge, and it happens regularly, the swarm of support, there is posts with like 50, 60, 70, 80 comments and either support or advice. So my advice will always be the same. So the first thing is you call it out directly. So sorry, what you just said to me, did I hear you right? Did I hear what you just said? Because to me, that didn't feel like a great experience, or that didn't feel like an appropriate thing to say in this environment. So first of all, call out on the person. If that person then doesn't deal with that in the right way, so immediately escalate that to whether that's HR or line manager, wherever you feel in your organization that is the right person to go to. And most businesses now have some sort of escalation policy for something like that. And, you know, there's sexual discrimination policies, so they should be adhering to those. And then the third thing is, if that is not dealt with in a way that you feel is appropriate, then I would seriously question, is this the right environment for you to work in? And that's always my advice, because if I don't feel like I am being listened or valued or acknowledged whenever I witness bad behavior, then I'm out of there.
Yeah.
And I know that that sounds like an easy thing for me to say at this point in my career, but I promise you right now, you have more value for yourself as an individual, and you will also make people more aware that this is important by standing up for yourself. And I actually think the younger generation are much more willing to do that now. Much more willing.
Absolutely.
I have a 21-year-old daughter. I tell you right now, she would not tolerate it. I think the more challenging groups are the people who've been in role for 10, 20 years and have witnessed this behavior and have tolerated because they didn't feel they have any other option. And now they're realizing, no, it was never right 10 years ago. And now if I raise it, custom and practice becomes a challenge. And therefore they feel more grounded and more, it's a more difficult position for them to say, so something I've accepted for 10 years, I'm now no longer prepared to accept.
Yes, when I speak to young people, I often feel quite jaded with the way society is going and the way the world is at the moment.
Yeah.
When I speak to younger people, where I watched a Question Time, which was young people, and they are so articulate, so informed, so aware, and so tolerant of each other. It's I watched the Question Time and thought this is a way better debate than a normal Question Time where we're just shouting at each other.
Yeah, yeah.
So, conscious that we're coming to the end, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball.
Okay.
Let's look forward 5 years. How do you see a state agency evolving? Structurally, we've talked about women in state agency, but no, broadly, more broad than that. How is a state agency going to change over the next 5 years? What do you think?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that in kind of two ways. First one, culturally. So I think we need way more diversity, not just gender diversity. We need much more diversity, ethnicity, religious diversity, color, creed diversity. We need to, as an industry, we need to look much more like the communities that we serve. Yeah. And I'm afraid, I mean, I won't mention any individual event, but I go to a lot of events and I see a distinct lack of diversity, not just female, male bias. And I think that is a problem for us. And I think it's a problem for the next generation, because going back to the next generation, they won't tolerate that. No. And we need to find ways in which to attract more diversity. So therefore, we need to act and be and create cultures that attract that level of diversity. So that's the first thing. Structurally, our consumers, not just the next generation, but even today's consumers, they want more flexibility. They want more from us. They don't want us to work in the hours or the locations that suit us. They want us to work in the hours and the locations that work for them. And as we all know, the Amazon culture, we want everything tomorrow or yesterday. We want they don't really understand the difference between a working week and a weekend anymore. They need more flexibility. So therefore, we have to create models and structures in our businesses that reflect that. So we have to be more flexible, and whether that's flexible in terms of the offering that we provide to them, and there's ranges of offerings, and going back to the fee point, we charge a much greater fee for a much more detailed service level. And I fear that we've sort of in this, we'll charge 1.5% and everybody gets the same kind of offering. And the self-employed brokerage, personal branded estate agency is massively playing into that space with flexibility. Yep. Consumers want a service that they feel is bespoke to them, that they feel that they are not just a number. And there's always going to be a cohort of customers who want cheapest deal, best price, and I want to do some of it myself because I don't want to pay top end. Great. And that's why our community that we serve is so diverse and it's varied in terms of their needs. We have to provide choice, flexibility, and solutions for whatever our customers want in the future.
That is fantastic. Verona Frankish, thank you very much for being so open, honest, and actually coming and doing, which I know sometimes get into quite sensitive areas. Thank you so much for doing that. That was
You're welcome.
really good.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.